Fighting for Faith and Nation, Dialogues with Sikh Militants, by Cynthia Kepley Mahmood. A literary man. Harpal Singh had come to talk with me about the Punjab problem, which I was told he viewed a little bit differently from most of the people with whom I was talking. He was interested not so much in Sikhism per se, but in Punjabiyat, the Punjabi culture or Punjabi nation. Since Punjabi nationalism and Sikh revivalism have become intertwined in the struggle for an independent Khalistan in Indian Punjab, this other, usually submerged angle is of considerable interest. Whereas Iqbal Singh, the Granthi of Chapter 3, feels that Punjabi nationalism has in some ways contaminated the more universalistic message of Sikh religious tradition, Harpal Singh views Punjabi culture and the freedom to express it as the heart of the Khalistan movement. The home in which I was staying had just celebrated the birth of a baby boy, named Manbir, after Manbir Singh Shahiru, founder of the Khalistan Commando Force. It was a place where Sikhs sympathetic to the Khalistan movement drifted in and out, not too far from the Gurudwara, that forms the epicenter of the local Sikh community. Blue balloons proclaiming, "It's a boy," hung incongruously in front of the ubiquitous painting of the destroyed Akal Takht, and crepe paper draped in front of the equally ubiquitous portrait of Guru Nanak. Bindranwala, in the dining room, remained unadorned. I asked Harpal Singh to tell me his story. I was especially interested in his description of himself as a literary man. "I'm not a fighter, like these guys," he had said. "I'm a thinking person." So I looked forward to hearing how Harpal Singh had come to embrace the idea of Khalistan. "My family had originally come from Pakistan," he began in fluent English, settling into the sofa, "but they went over to Amritsar in 1947. I lived there as well as in Uttar Pradesh and Bombay, as my father was in the military. Then he bought some land and settled down to do agriculture. How was it that you came to be interested in literary matters?" I inquired. "As I was growing up, I used to go to the library regularly to read newspapers, magazines, and books. I got this habit of reading from my mother, who used to read the holy book every morning and every evening. She would ask me to write one shabad, or verse, from the holy book every day. Anyway," he continued, "among the newspapers I used to read were Ajit, which was a Punjabi language paper, and Punjab Kesari, in Hindi. It became quite interesting to see the different ways they approached what was happening in the news. The editor of Ajit focused on Punjab and Punjabiyat, while the editor of Punjab Kesari, Lala Jagat Narain, emphasized Hindi, Hindustan, and Brahmanism. I had the feeling even then, that there was something wrong with Punjab Kesari. I mean, Punjabi is our mother language, so we must love it and we must read it. Why were we wasting all our resources to learn Hindi, to learn English, when so many people can't read and write Punjabi?" Later on I learned that all across the world, people want to read and write their own languages. But it wasn't so obvious to many Punjabis in those days that our language might be in trouble. I told Harpal about my previous research on the Frisians, people in the Netherlands who have also become concerned about the erosion of the Frisian language. Yes, he said, he had heard of that. We talked a bit about Spanish language issues in the United States, then he continued with his story. "Anyway, in spite of these feelings about the neglect of our Punjabi language, I continued to read Punjab Kesari, because I wanted to see what those people were thinking. I also read some magazines oriented toward communism, because I wanted to see what that was all about as well. But I was always thinking that this communism was something Russian, not Punjabi, and maybe it did not suit us Punjabis very well." "Did you agree with any of the things you were reading in those magazines?" I asked. "Yes, on social issues they were very good. But then I started reading foreign periodicals like Time and Newsweek, and I started seeing how many different ways of thinking there really were in the world. I started reading novels and history books, mostly about new countries and how they got their freedom. Which ideas would help us Punjabis? I thought. Is there anything here for us? When you attended university, I asked, was the medium of instruction English. India retained this colonial habit, often to the eventual advantage of university graduates, who were then well prepared to function in the international arena. But various brands of nationalists continue to chafe at the prominence of the language of the colonialists in academia, and in Indian society generally. Yes, Harpal Singh answered. I kept wondering why I could not use Punjabi in college. But I wanted to study law, and the law books are all in English. I used to fight with my professors as to why the law books could not be written in our own language. But of course, in the end I went ahead and read English. We all compromise like this, and in the end we find ourselves in a sick society. In 1978, a new newspaper came out in Chandigarh, the Tribune. There had been an English-language Tribune for over 100 years, but finally somebody got the idea to put out the Tribune in Punjabi. I was very happy to see this, and I wrote to the newspaper to congratulate them on this step. I then learned that our Punjabi language radio station in Jalandhar was broadcast in medium waves, not in short waves like the other major stations. That meant that if somebody was living outside of Punjab, say in UP, Uttar Pradesh, they would not be able to hear Punjabi radio. I told him about Frisian efforts at radio and TV broadcasting, as part of the program to shore up the language. Eventually a TV station was set up in Amritsar. But I was sick to find out that most of the programs were broadcast in both Punjabi and Hindi. To me, my language is so very sweet, and I couldn't stand to see Punjabi mixed up with Hindi. Sometimes there would be a perfectly good word in Punjabi, but the TV station would use a Hindi word in its place. We are losing our language, I was thinking. I became preoccupied with this idea. Even when I would think to myself in Punjabi, the words seemed unbearably beautiful, because I was afraid they might disappear. But even I started using Hindi words here and there, because that Hindi influence was all around me. I later learned that Indian Punjabis concerned with the language issue commonly perceive the Punjabi spoken by Pakistanis as more pure, since it has not been contaminated by Hindi. But Pakistani Punjabi has also, of course, been evolving, in that case due to influence from Persian and Arabic. Nevertheless, a grass is greener on the other side mentality persists. Harpal Singh continued. My friends started teasing me about my fixation on the language question. They used to call me Punjabi as a nickname. Hey, that Punjabi guy is coming, like that. Some of them in fact could barely speak adequate Punjabi, as they had been educated in convent schools. Then he went on to relate how his interest in language translated into a broader interest in politics. In 1978, I had a job delivering papers in Moradarbad, UP, and I read in the Bharat Times there about the confrontation between the Nirankaris and the Sikhs. I didn't know much about them, until I read that they were a sect which worshipped a living person as a guru. This pained me, as it is totally against the Sikh idea. It wasn't until I started reading materials from Sikh Missionary College, that I was able to understand what was really happening with the Nirankaris. Had you heard of Bhindranwala at that time? I asked. No, I read in the papers, that's all. I didn't have any personal involvement in any of it at that time. But I should say that I was at the same time coming to realize that there were economic issues facing our community too. My family was in agriculture, and I saw that after such hard work, we were not getting anything for our labor. The agents who take the grain from us and give it to the government have every facility, good refrigerators, new fans, nice clean clothes. But the people toiling in the fields every day have torn clothes, no refrigerators, old fans that don't work. Just tea and a piece of bread, just an old house that's too small and falling apart. This was also painful to me. I developed a great sense of sympathy for the rural people. After that I started taking correspondence courses from Agricultural University, Ludhiana. The books were all in English. In a course on agriculture in Punjab, the textbooks were in English. I went to a big meeting there and stood before my professor, and I said that I refused to read English to learn about Punjabi agriculture. In front of all of them, I tore up my books, then I went back to my seat. How did people react to that? I queried. They were shocked, of course. The professor wrote to me that I had done a very bad thing. But I went to him and told him respectfully, that he was not helping Punjab by assigning English books, not helping the farmers, the real sons of the land. The professors really couldn't understand this position, because they had all gone to government schools to enter their profession. They didn't have real contact with people working on the land, although they were professors of agriculture. So these things, the economic part, the religious part, and the language part, started rumbling in the inner core of my soul. I had the sense that there was something deeply wrong with the way things were. I asked, "So what did you do?" Harpal Singh continued his narrative. I started thinking about what should be done. I thought about communism, because many aspects of communism seemed to me to be quite good. A friend of mine was a leader in the Naxalbari movement, a Maoist agitation centered in Bengal, and we used to have long discussions about communism. He said that religion was the opium of the people, and that was a part of his philosophy that I didn't agree with. I said that what he was doing was right, but that in Punjab he would never succeed, if he said that religion was an opium. We Sikhs are a product of our religion. Our first prophet Guru Nanak made us Sikhs. How could we say that what he said was wrong? I tried to pursue this further, as for many people seeking change in India, socialist movements remain a primary attraction, and given the Gaddar history, there is a particular interest here for Sikhs. So you thought that although they were sincere about helping the people, the Naxalites were mistaken as far as religion was concerned. At least for Punjab, for Sikhs. Right, especially for Punjab. I told my friends that the Sikhs had sacrificed thousands of lives for this land. So why should they honor Lenin, why should they honor Marx here? I am not saying that Marx was wrong. He said many good things. But I say that although Marx might be good for Europe, although Lenin might be good for Russia, they are not good for Punjab. Because the blood of Sikhs has sunk into this land, and we have to remember Guru Nanak, we have to remember our religion, when we honor our land. If you bring a seed from Russia, you cannot get food from Punjab's land with that seed, Harpal said. When you plant a seed in Punjab, you have to remember Guru Nanak, who preached here, Guru Gobind Singh, who sacrificed his entire family here. On these matters I told the Naxalites, I am not with you. You cannot succeed in Punjab with this scheme. Indeed, in the end they failed. They were sincere, they made great sacrifices, but they failed. I was not such a devout Sikh at that time, Harpal Singh continued. But I knew a lot about history. I started thinking about Guru Arjan, the first martyr of Sikhism, and about Guru Tegh Bahadur, the ninth master. I started thinking about Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who had his own empire when the British arrived here. What was wrong with Punjab, I didn't know in any clear way. I am just saying that these kinds of historical thoughts were floating in my mind, as I observed the problems before me. I traveled in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Bengal. The people there seemed rather lazy to me. They were doing nothing, just sleeping and lying around. I couldn't help thinking that they didn't know how to get money from their land. We Sikhs work hard and know how to make the land productive. We need more help, more electricity, more power, than what we grow we could give to the rest of India. But they say no, they will give those resources to the whole country, even though the others aren't using them properly. I interrupted this train of thought, because it was a common refrain that I found troubling. So the point is not that you don't want to share with the rest of India, but that you have to have the resources to make Punjab wealthy enough to share? I asked. But he pursued his own line of thinking. Let me give you an example. There is a big electricity plant in Punjab, the Barkra Dam. It might be the biggest in Asia, I'm not sure. Anyway, the electricity from Barkra Dam is going to Rajasthan. To UP, to Delhi, to other places. But not to Punjab. Why? Why do you think the central government does that? I questioned. I wanted to see just how purposeful he thought this strategy was. They gave us a thermal plant. The thermal plant is more expensive. The hydro projects, they are cheap. So they are getting cheap electricity for the whole country, but giving us thermal plants that are costly. If a big train of coal from Bihar to Punjab gets stopped, we won't have electricity. We prefer the hydroelectricity, but we don't get it, even though it comes from our rivers. The Union government, as part of its nation-building project, has adopted an economic model that puts national interests before regional interests. Since Punjab is a rich state, though underdeveloped, its financial deposits, river waters, and energy supplies are diverted to other states. This has hindered the state's own industrial development, and made it more dependent on the Indian Union. If there is a two-thirds majority in Parliament in favor of such a resolution, the Union government has the power to legislate on state issues. Hindus as well as Sikhs would suffer from this sort of thing, wouldn't they? I asked. I mean, it would be the whole of Punjab that would be affected, not just one community. No, it turned out to be mostly directed against Sikhs, because Sikhs are in the majority in Punjab, and because those Sikhs are the ones working the land. The Hindus are not so much concerned with agriculture. In my village there were a lot of Hindus doing the professional work in post offices, banks, schools. Why are the Sikhs not in banks? Why are the Sikhs not in schools? Why are the Sikhs not nurses and doctors? They are all Hindus. They have cars and scooters, while we are on bicycles. And let me tell you that those Hindus also have no tie to the Punjabi language. They say that Hindi is their mother tongue on the census, to distinguish themselves from Punjabi Sikhs. Don't get me wrong, I had many Hindu friends. I went to their homes and all. And though at home they speak Punjabi, on the census they list Hindi as their language. They hate Punjabi because they think Punjabi is the language of the Sikhs. They think they are too good for it. So when you ask whether a movement is religious or linguistic, you can see that because of the alienation of the Hindus, these two turned out to be linked in our case. Punjabiyat might include Hindus, you might think, but most of the Hindus have chosen otherwise. Punjabiyat has now become the concern of the Sikhs, because no one else cares to preserve it. I tried to return to a more chronological narrative. So this was your general mood before the 1984 events? I asked. Even before that, by the late 1970s. In 1981 or 1982, I don't exactly remember when, I was coming home from Delhi, when I read in the Punjabi Tribune, that the editor of Punjab Kesari had been killed. Somebody had gone and killed him. I realized suddenly that I was feeling happy as I read this news. Why was I happy? Because this man had told all the Hindus of Punjab that they were part of Hindustan, that their mother language was not Punjabi but Hindi. He bore a large responsibility for the alienation of the Punjabi Hindus from their heritage, the common heritage with us. So I thought that it was a good thing that he was gone, because people like this were a bad thing for Punjab. Get this straight. I want to live in peace. By all means let us live in peace. But if somebody is trying to disturb our peace by exciting people's minds, by creating conflict, one time there was an interview in India Today with Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwala. He said that we Sikhs know how to sacrifice our lives for peace, but at the same time we know how to cut others to pieces. We love peace, we die for peace, but if somebody interferes with our peace, we will not tolerate it. We cannot tolerate being slaves to a country that doesn't respect us, our religion, our culture, our language. Do you understand what I mean? Your feelings were becoming very strong, I asked. Yes, I was becoming clearer in my mind that the situation must be changed. I started thinking about freedom, about the freedom of my people. I used to see some graffiti written at the bus stands, that used to say, Sikh Homeland Zindabad, long live the Sikh homeland. It was written by that crowd around Jagjit Singh Chauhan, an early advocate of Khalistan, now in exile in London, and Gachinder Singh, who hijacked a plane to Pakistan, now in prison in Lahore. At the time I was thinking, what is the Sikh homeland? But as I saw the situation in Punjab developing, I remembered that graffiti. I started thinking about the idea of a Sikh homeland. Around that time, the early 1980s, people from the All India Sikh Students' Federation started coming around my college. They were very intelligent, very sincere, and they told the students about the crimes of the Indian state, and about the false encounters, extrajudicial executions, that had already started happening in Punjab. I decided to become a member. Then in January or February of 1984, some guys from my village were on a train coming from Haryana, which was stopped by a gang of Hindus. The Sikhs were taken off that train and beaten very badly. My friends told how they were beaten with sticks and even with iron rods. One of them had to get 18 stitches on his head where he had been hit with an iron rod. I was upset by this, very upset. Why did they stop that train? Why did they beat these Sikhs? Were those people ever prosecuted? I asked. No, never. And there was a worse episode. The Hindus tore the clothes off a young lady. They tore the clothes off her father too, and told her father to lay with his daughter. This was so painful to hear, I couldn't stand to hear this. Why were people so cruel? And why didn't the government do anything about it? This is the most hurtful thing in our culture, in our religion. We simply cannot stand this. He was becoming emotional as he spoke. I collected my close friends, and I told them, we are going to have to kill these people. We sent messages to all the All India Sikh Students' Federation members, and held a big meeting in our village. We called all the village people to come together there, totaling more than 1,000 people. We asked each other what we should do. And in that process my younger brother decided to go off to Amritsar, to Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwala. He said that he would never come back, but that he would live and die for his country, for the Sikh homeland. There was no more rule of law in India, that was all there was to it. We had to depend on ourselves. Did your family support your brother's decision to go? Well, Harpal Singh answered, my mother said that our history is like that, full of crises in religion and society, and that when there is a crisis, somebody has to take care of it. My father disagreed a little. But my mom told him, look, somebody has to do it, so why not your son? In the end he agreed. I went 3 or 4 times myself to listen to Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwala. He explained clearly that what he and the others were doing was for our society, for our religion, for our nation. He said that staying in India would mean the genocide of the Sikhs, and I think he was right. His way of talking was also very impressive. It was very simple, very sincere. People used to come from all over Punjab to hear him speak. And big newspaper journalists from all over the world came to interview him. And when some of the Indian press started calling him a fanatic and an extremist, Harpal interrupted me. That was wrong, plain wrong. You know that the press in India is not a real press. You can say it's a prostitute. The whole press is under the control of the Brahmins, chained to the Brahmanical way of thinking. If they could not get the advertisements from the big Hindu companies, how could they run their papers? Believe me, I know how these papers operate because I worked on them for years. I read Hindi papers, English papers, Punjabi papers. The Hindi papers particularly are bad for every minority, Christians, Buddhists, Muslims as well as Sikhs. What they started saying was, why are the Sikhs complaining? They have everything. That bad man Bhindranwala is misleading everybody. But we knew what was wrong and we loved Bhindranwala, no matter what the Hindu press was saying about him. I should tell you that after that federation meeting, the police started keeping a sharp eye on me. A police inspector came to my house and started asking me about it, and I explained that we were discussing that episode in Haryana. "Do you like it that the Hindus did this?" I asked the police inspector. But he told me to just answer his questions. In May of 1984, there was an important episode in my village. My brother and my cousin came back from Amritsar, and they told me they had come to kill two Hindus who were talking loudly against the Sikhs. I told them they would not get anywhere by just killing a couple of Hindus who talked too freely, that they were not really responsible for anything. I thought that we had to see who were the truly responsible parties, not just respond emotionally to every insult. But they said no, we cannot tolerate those Hindus talking against the Sikh community, spreading so many rumors. So they killed them and ran. After that, the police came and arrested me and two colleagues who were lawyers. But we all got out on bail, after the whole village showed up at the police station, and demanded that we be released. Did you feel upset with your brother and your cousin, for killing the two Hindus and for putting you in that kind of situation? I asked. No, Harpal Singh answered. They were doing what they thought was the right thing. I disagreed, but I didn't blame them. Anyway, in the last 2 weeks in May, we started collecting wheat to bring to the community kitchen at the Golden Temple. 20 members of the All India Sikh Students Federation decided to collect about 1,000 kilos of wheat in a large truck to bring to that langar. We went to farms and to people's houses to collect it. We were getting ready to bring it to the Golden Temple, when we started hearing on the radio that the Indian Army had been brought in, and was surrounding the temple precincts. We listened to BBC and Voice of America, until all the journalists were thrown out of Punjab, so that nobody would know what was going on. We kept listening to Indian broadcasts, but we knew everything we heard was false. My mother was just worried about her son, who was with Bhindranwala at the Akal Takht. But I was also thinking that if the military would actually go into the Golden Temple complex, so many people would be killed. It was the martyrdom day of Guru Arjan, so thousands of pilgrims would be visiting there. Well, you know what happened in Operation Blue Star. But my brother got out of there, and about a week later we all got arrested, my brother, me, my cousin, and some friends. I was sleeping on the roof, as it was the hot season, and suddenly I found the barrel of a gun poking my chest. The military were everywhere, on the whole ground floor of our house, in all the streets around the house, and sweeping through the whole neighborhood. It was like waking up and being in the middle of a war. "Why are you arresting me?" I was asking. "Shut up," they said, and they bound my hands behind my back. I heard some soldiers shouting at my mother in a very rude way, and I told them, "Hold your tongues and speak nicely to my mother." For that I got a hard slap on the mouth. We were taken from our village in a big military truck, with heavy security in front and in back. We were thrown into 3 cells in Jalandhar jail, where we were interrogated. "Give us your arms. Give us weapons," they were shouting. I said, "I don't have any weapons. If I were involved in anything, you wouldn't find me peacefully sleeping at home, would you?" Anyway, we were put into jail under tight security. It was a very bad experience. Punjab jails are terrible, and the people who work there are psychopaths. I interrupted. "At that time, were you baptized? Had you taken Amrit?" "No, not yet," replied Harpal. "I was thinking that I wasn't ready to take that step yet. It is a very sacred thing, and one has to be spiritually ready for it. At that time, I was only thinking that the time had come that Sikhs had to leave India, had to have Khalistan. Life had become impossible for us in India. Later, when I heard more of the details of Operation Blue Star, when I heard from relatives in Amritsar, how the army had slaughtered people outright, carrying the bodies in trucks through the streets, I became even more convinced about this. How could such a thing be forgotten, much less forgiven? Even those who were not very intellectual, who were simple people, reacted like this. They hadn't thought very much about Khalistan, but they all knew that staying with India just wasn't an option any longer for us, whatever that decision might cost. After we got out of jail, we started going around to the villages to hand out literature about Khalistan. We released the real story of what went on during Operation Blue Star, because everywhere else one heard only propaganda. My relatives had observed what was going on from outside the complex, and my brother had been inside, of course, with Bhindranwala. He knew how many military personnel had been killed, and it was more than was being publicized. He himself had killed some. I asked him whether he was sure that was the right thing to do, and he reminded me that Bhindranwala had said, that to kill was bad, but to have arms and not to assert one's rights, was worse. Our holiest shrine had to be defended, he said. He then went underground with his comrades, and we didn't see them after that. Police started coming to our place frequently, sometimes by day, sometimes by night. I myself had to report to the police every 3 days, and was not supposed to leave my home. Did you have any thought, yourself, of joining one of the guerrilla forces? I asked. No, my interlocutor said. I am not a man of the gun. I am a literary man. But even such a person as me, can't avoid the hand of the Indian police. Now in the next part of this story, Harpal continued, I have to introduce the character of my cousin. My cousin was a truck driver, and he had a route from Calcutta to Punjab. In June 1984, he happened to be passing through Ramgarh cantonment, and you may know that there was a big mutiny there of Sikh soldiers, in protest of Operation Blue Star. The mutineers approached his truck with all their weapons, and ordered my cousin to take them to Patna, so that they could hijack a plane to Amritsar, to save the Golden Temple. He complied with this request, but the Indian military followed the truck and killed all the mutineers riding on it. They spared my cousin, since he was the driver, but they put a big case on him, and he went to jail in Allahabad. What eventually happened was that my cousin's brother-in-law, who was in the Middle East, sent a visa for him to get out of India. He couldn't use it, of course, because he was in jail. So I visited him and we decided that I should leave India, using his name and his visa. My cousin told me, look, I may be in jail forever. So you had better go someplace where you can work for Khalistan. By that time he was convinced also. Is your cousin still in jail? No, Harpal said. He was eventually released. But I have to tell you that after 2 or 3 years my brother was killed in an encounter with the military forces. Do you know anything about the circumstances of his death? I asked. Not much, he answered. I read about it in the papers and my family wrote me a letter about it. At one point he had killed a minister, I forget his name, but it was a minister from the Congress Party. An informer reported on him, and he was killed along with about 12 others. My family tried to collect his body for cremation, but they were unable to obtain it. So we never found out what happened to my brother's body. In the end, how did your family feel about your brother's activities? Well, they were proud. Because when a boy or girl dies for Khalistan, dies for our religion, we say it's a martyrdom. We celebrate martyrdom and honor those who martyred for the cause. My family recited Guru Bani, and hundreds of people came to the Gurudwara to remember my brother. My whole village and my whole society honored him. You have to understand that even our enemies praise the way we sacrifice our lives if necessary. Someone who offers his life for the people becomes part of them, strengthens them. A sincere martyrdom is a very good thing, we think. That is why in the end we will succeed. Nobody can beat us for devotion.